the Off the Podcast crossbar. Never mind. This is the TFL Podcast, episode 11. This week on the Off the Boss. I can't even say it, Teddy.
Jesus, man. Off the crossbar. You hit enough of them with your head.
I can't even say off the crib and hitting the head too much. Hey, this week, I'm super pumped. I'm doing a whole West Coast swing here because I've had the Americans, I've had the East Coast guys. They get tedious. But let me tell you, the Western guys are grounded. It's God's country, and we go way out to the West Coast. We do I think as I was setting this up, the seventh ranked brother team on Vancouver Island in Victoria.
Oh, on Vancouver Island? Oh, come on now. I thought you were going to say the NLL. I was going to be like, appreciate it.
There's a question later. We'll talk about later exactly where you guys fall in the pantheon of brothers in lacrosse from Victoria. So anyway, my really good friends, long history with the older brother here, Fredi Jenner, and played together in Team Canada and had him in a couple of teams that I had. You can see the jerseys behind him. Fredi, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, bud.
Appreciate it, Stevie. Thanks, man. This is my real first opportunity to speak other than cars when I'm on camera.
Very good. I'm excited to have you. Teddy Jenner, otherwise known as Teddy Knight, Teddy Ballgame, Teddy. I don't know. He's got a bunch of aliases, right? So I'm not even sure what your mother calls you, but son. Yeah. So excited to have Teddy Jenner, who is creating an illustrious career as a National Lacrosse League media personality. He's a play-by-play guy for the Colorado Mammoth. He is currently, and when this airs, we won't know, but he's been nominated as Media Person of the Year for the National Lacrosse League. And, congratulations if you won, and you suck if you lost. So we'll find out. This will air after we find out who wins. So welcome to the show, Teddy.
I appreciate it, Steve. It's nice to be on the other end of this conversation for once. So this is my first time on a low-rated podcast, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. The good news is you can say whatever you want because nobody's listening.
Yeah, no one's listening.
Yeah. I mean, it's look, you got to start somewhere. And at some point when I get my liquor sponsor here, everybody's going to want to come on. I will say this. I do hear from a lot of guys in the league that want to be on. I get these texts from guys all the time asking why they haven't been on. So you guys are on episode 11. And you'll always cherish the fact that you got on before lots of other guys.
Just missed the top 10.
Yeah, but 11th overall was where I was drafted, so that's a good spot to be.
I guess the good news here is that most of the people that I care about, I shouldn't say that, most of the people that are really important to me are the guys that I played with and played around and the guys that are in the league. Those are the guys that are listening to this. So it's low rated because, fans don't care about the guests that I have. So that's more about the issue here. But hey, tell me who
stopped doing videos, Steve.
What's that?
Stop doing videos. That's why.
Why? Because if you put Fredi and I together, we make a quality looking ass. Two bald guys.
Exactly.
Anyway. Hey,
just set us in a bra and you're all good.
There we go. Hey, tell me who put the stick in your hand for the first time.
For me, it would have been probably way back when I was in North Vancouver. Neighborhood friends of mine, Jeff and Scott Rawson brothers, they lived down the street, and they were the ones that put a lacrosse stick in my hand first. And
wow.
So I played for the Sea Caps in North Shore, in the North Shore.
Kidding.
Yeah.
So Teddy, was it the same person that put the stick in your hand, or did it
No,
ultimately just become because your older brother was?
Brother Fred put it in my hand. We're 7 years apart, so he had a pretty good head start on me before I ever got started. But for all that he's ever told me, or my parents ever told me, I was always around him and his buddies whenever they were at the box. I was the little kid with the helmet that was 7 sizes too big and the shorts that went down to his shoes, and just run around chasing loose balls. But it was every day hanging around with my brother and his teammates.
What's surprising about that is you didn't end up being a goalie.
I'm smarter, Very smart. I'm very smart. Very smart.
Well, it always seems like the little brother always ends up.
Yeah,
being
but
bullied.
that's usually when the brother's like maybe 1 or 2 years. I'm like 7 years younger. That's like a pretty big jump. So when he's 19, I'm 12. I'm not. 19-year-olds aren't going to be whipping balls at a 12-year-old kid. So
No.
I don't know. Lots
We
of guys.
were too busy jumping skateboards over your head.
that's right. I was laid down at the end of the jump as they went over me.
So you guys live in Victoria at this point. I know Fredi is an illustrious businessman selling a lot of automobiles, used car salesman from Victoria. But Teddy is in the lacrosse world. But talk about Victoria as a lacrosse hotbed, because there's not many places like it, right? I mean, you could go across the board to Peterborough, Orangeville, New Westminster, and Victoria, and there's probably lots of people that are going to argue that their town should be in this mix. But man, those are the 4 places, that are steeped so much in tradition in lacrosse. Talk about being from there and what lacrosse means in that community.
Well, I think the biggest thing with our community is that, we don't really have other teams to compete against when you're at that in the different, junior and senior levels, right? Like Nanaimo's our closest real rival because we're sort of on that island, literally. And, it's not like where there's New West and New West is the exception, but Coquitlam and Burnaby and things like that. I think the biggest thing is that for a lot of our fans, because we were so close to our idols and the people that we were watching playing as we were growing up, it led to the fact that we could see these people in the grocery store quite frequently, or the gas station, or at businesses.
And they still kept coming?
Of course, yeah. So I think the thing about us, right, is that yes, we've had a pretty rich history, but we've all the for the longest time, when you grew up in Victoria, you ended up playing for Victoria. You weren't getting drafted to go play in Burnaby, or you weren't getting drafted to go play somewhere else. You grew up and you played in Victoria, and I think that held the kids use it as a goal right now, but I think it was a big thing for us to say, I'm going to play for the Shamrocks one day, and there was nobody else you wanted to play for, right? I think we had such a huge history of amazing lacrosse players that came way before us, Whitey and Kevin and, Dean Shaw's and Dylan's and, all these names, obviously the Gates and things like that, but all these names before us, it created a culture that you wanted to wear that, right? And you wanted to
the right way. That was impressive.
I know. I'm surprised I did that myself on
Teddy,
one try.
Teddy, welcome back to the show.
Take, that was the first time.
Teddy, thanks for coming to the show. It's nice to have you back. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I think to kind of go on what Fred was saying is, there weren't other teams that we could get drafted to or play for, but there were no other major teams here. Like the Victoria Shamrocks are the draw in Victoria. We don't have NHL or NBA or NFL or baseball or high-level soccer. The Victoria Shamrocks were the elite team in Victoria, other than, if they had, the Victoria Cougars of the junior hockey where, Grant Fear and the Courtnalls were here way back in the early 80s and the late 70s. But if you went to a sporting event in Victoria, it was to go see the Shamrocks. And Memorial Arena back in the day was 5,000 people strong. And it was just phenomenal to be a part of that as a young kid. And like Fred said, you wanted to grow up to be a Shamrock.
So it's pretty much in Canada among the top 4 markets for lacrosse in the country, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
So in that limited world, because Canada is not very big and lacrosse isn't very big, how is it that you guys are the 6th or 7th ranked brother group, set of brothers on the island alone? I mean, let's not even count Nanaimo, but in Victoria.
Okay, well, hold on a sec. So
Fred's group had the Peppers, the Gates,
right,
the Blackwells. Like there was 6 or 7 brother groups.
Yeah,
the Hamiltons, right? Like there was
in that group, but it was even more. What's even crazier about that group is they're all the same age.
Yeah.
So they grew up playing like all the sports together, right? So
I am well aware. I was on the other side of that. You know that, right?
So I mean, like, yeah, you're talking about all these brothers those ones, the Gates, like I said, the Gates, the Peppers, you throw in the Blackwells, but I'm going to put myself, I'm going to rank ourselves higher than the Blackwells.
Thank you.
And I'm going to rank ourselves higher than the Dennetts, right?
Yeah.
But, you have that group of guys that, they just competed with each other, like on the playgrounds and the basketball, rugby, soccer, all that stuff together, and lacrosse, right? So those guys, they were just monsters and athletes among themselves. But I would say that the nice thing was, again, as Ted said, there was no other game in town here for siblings to play for. You always wanted to play for the Shamrocks. So then you start to get that sort of next level of generation where now you're potentially talking about the Kings for one, or some brothers moving down the line after this. You're talking about well, again, I'll get to my point. My point is that, now you're in an era where you can get drafted anywhere, right? And you just didn't have that when we were growing up. So I still want to say the top 7th brother combo. I don't know. That's putting us a little low, I think.
I do think, in all seriousness, those brothers played the game because you had somebody to play catch with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, Victoria, we joke about it, but there are a lot of unbelievable players, much like Orangeville and even Six Nations, right, that have come out of a really small area. I mean, Six Nations is a nation, right? They're a nation that plays the game, and the number of players that have come out of that small area. But Victoria definitely has to be up there in all seriousness. But talk about your pathway into the National Lacrosse League. How did you get where you ended up going? And Teddy, I know you went to Mercyhurst and went away to college and played with some pretty amazing players at Mercyhurst and guys that were legends in their own right in the game, but and went on to amazing careers. And Patrick Merrill is one of them.
Just some guy you happen to know. Just that one name you could pull out.
Yeah, but talk about your pathway.
I went, like I said, I went to Mercyhurst, which was a D2 college in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I always knew at the end of the day that I wanted to take that into the National Lacrosse League. It just so happened that my latter 2 years, Fred was up in Syracuse playing for the Smash, so I could go with my buddies. We could drive up to Buffalo, which was an hour away. Syracuse was 2 hours away, so we could get to a bunch of games and go watch. But after I got drafted, like, this is a crazy story. So my teacher and our assistant sports information director at Mercyhurst was Craig Rubzinski, who is the Rochester PR guy, the Rochester play-by-play guy, one of the 3 guys nominated for the Brelly. He's a mentor of mine, an incredible friend. But I really think that while Jody Gage and Paul Day kind of may knew of me, I probably wouldn't have gotten drafted by Rochester if Ripper wasn't there. Because I have a feeling he said, you know what, this kid was at Mercer's. He's a great lefty, a goal scorer. He's a Canadian kid. And they obviously kind of, again, knew who I was, and that might have persuaded them. So I owe a lot of that to Ripper, and I actually called my first NLL game with Ripper when I was a healthy scratch in Rochester. So
did Ripper really call you a great lefty?
So as a D2 lefty, yes. As a D2 lefty. As a D2 lefty. From
I
Erie.
just want to know, Fredi, was Syracuse Smash the worst name in the history of all sports names?
No
way.
I'll say no.
No way.
Name in the history of not only our sport, but maybe all sports.
Charlotte Cobras?
That's a great name.
When you think of Cobras, what do you think of? Dodgeball.
Oh, my God.
Right? Come on, man.
No, actually, I didn't think of that, but now I will.
Cobras were that was well before dodgeball.
Fredi, what was your pathway? You were Victoria guy, gonna go into the family business. How did you get into the NLL?
So, like, I went a little bit different route. I went to Western Reserve Academy in high school, Hudson, Ohio. So I played lacrosse in high school, as opposed to going away to college. And yeah, I kind of had the plans to, get into family business and start running the show here.
For those people that don't know, Ben McIntosh, Garrett
Yep.
McIntosh, Western Reserve Academy
Hale
alums as
Hale
well, right?
Ratcliffe went there.
Hale Ratcliffe, yeah. There's a few.
Yeah,
There's
there's a lot of
definitely a few
guys.
names out of reserve, but you know, there's a lot to say about, you know, where I sort of started in the field side of things, and I love the field game a lot. But you know, being on the Victoria and the West Coast at that time, there still wasn't a lot of guys making the journey into pro, other than obviously Gates, Maricheks, and a bunch of the guys from the mainland. It really wasn't around that 90, yourself, your 96, 97 era when it really started to kind of become an opportunity for East Coast teams to fly in guys from the West. And when, you know, the smash came around, you know, you look at our roster that first year, we were basically the 1997 Shamrock Man Cup champions playing in Syracuse. You know, there were a lot of guys off that team.
And you guys sucked that bad?
What's that?
You guys sucked that bad? You were
Yeah,
champions.
it's a different game. It was the turf, man. It slowed us down.
I can't believe that team had so many. First of all, Paul Gate put it together. Had so many Victoria guys.
Well, yeah. So Paul Gate. So he started. Obviously, was that the big influence of the whole thing. But then there was me, Del Halliday, Chris Pratt, Pepper,
Wasn't Marty your goalie?
Yeah.
Tapper, Marty O'Neill, Doddridge. Like, yeah, we had.
Jimmy Rankin was there.
What's that?
Jimmy Rankin was there.
Jimmy Rankin. Yeah. So I mean, like we had
how's that team not very good?
That's what I'm saying.
Obviously, like I said, it was the turf. It slowed us down, man, and we didn't have the Memorial hot dogs, right? It was just one of those things. So I don't know. You know, that's how I kind of got my start, was that when they were building that franchise, obviously with the influence of the 97 Man Cup coming around, you know, it was, hey, when you're putting a team together, you're kind of looking at going, hey, I can grab a bunch of guys from one area and away we go. And they already know each other. They already have the chemistry, a good foundation for a group. And then you kind of build
that
around.
Worked out well for them.
Yeah. Well, you put all those guys in Syracuse in an apartment building. None of them have been away from Victoria probably for longer than a week. And they're all in the middle of Syracuse. They got nothing to do. There's nothing to do during the week. Like, what do you expect? It's Syracuse.
Yeah, they were
Syracuse.
They were drinking and going to Dinosaur Barbecue.
Dinosaurs, yep.
Every day.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, so obviously, Teddy, when you went into your first locker room, there was a lot of guys you knew, but like, who was your guy? Teddy, who was your guy when you walked into the Rochester locker room?
Junior. 100% it was Junior. John Grant. We lived in the same building together. We traveled to practices and games together. We hung out during the week. But I was just enamored with John Grant Jr. We're like 4 years apart, but like the guy was what I wanted to be. And I think, funny, Paul Day and Jody Gage always used to say that to me. They're like, "You're not Junior. Stop trying to be Junior." and so I kind of got in trouble my rookie year because I was trying to do Junior shit, right? Like I was trying to bounce balls off the glass and throw backhanders from my knees. And I'm like, I'm just this punk rookie that, you know, should know better. But like, you know, I had Dewey Jacobs and the Molosky brothers and Tim Sudan and Reggie Thorpe and Pat O'Toole, Mike Hazen. Casey Zapp is probably the other guy that I just really flocked to, because he just carried himself with such an aura and such composure. But he could also walk on his hands. He just flip upside down and walk around the turf on his hands. I was like, how the hell does a guy do that?
Casey Zaff,
I know he was a gymnast.
For those people that don't know Casey Zaff, one of the greatest guys to play our game, and the tragic end of his career,
for sure,
was just, you know, Teddy, tell that story briefly.
Yeah,
I know we're here to have some fun, but it's worth talking about Casey Zaff.
Yeah, because, you know, Fred and I were kind of joking earlier, you know, when he said, you know, who was this guy we were going to talk about? And I said, just blame it on concussions. And, you know, he and I both kind of stopped playing lacrosse because we got soft heads and we've had our bells rung a bunch of times. Well, Casey's another one of those guys that kind of dealt with it, and he was having headaches and migraines. He went and saw a doctor, and he just wasn't feeling right. And he went and saw the doctor, and the doctor's like, I just don't see anything wrong with you. And as he was walking out of the doctor's office, he collapsed. And He had major bleeding and in his brain, and he went through a whole process of, will he make it through it? And we're all incredibly happy that he has, and that he's kind of back to doing normal things. He's an incredible father. He was a teacher at Humber College, but he's getting back into the lacrosse world. I saw him at a Rochester alumni event a couple years ago in Rochester, and just an amazing guy. He would run through the wall for anybody. And I was very blessed to be his teammate, but so happy that he's still around with us.
Thanks for telling that story, because we want to make sure that this is all about trying to remember the past of our game and do it with a few laughs. But certainly that was a tragic story for everybody, but glad it's had some level of happy ending, and wish him all the best. Obviously, we've all had hits to the head, and we joke about it, but it's nothing to joke about. And hopefully the rules in the league now are poised to take care of those guys. But Fredi, who was your guy? Who was your guy in your locker room with Syracuse when you first started?
It would be a bit of a toss-up between, obviously Paul Gate held the room without question, right? So, whatever he was saying and whatever he was talking about, I mean, obviously everybody kind of fell into that. And that was
I joke about this, but does Paul Gate get a bad rap?
I don't think he gets a bad rap. No, I mean,
everything's Gary. That Syracuse is 22, and everybody talks about Gary Gate. Paul's the afterthought.
No, I think in my opinion, I think what it is Paul has always been a little, as crazy as a little more quiet than Gary, but he behind the scenes is probably as much, if not more, than what is happening with Gary. So I think there's a lot to say about what Paul does behind the scenes, and that's kind of the way he likes it, right? And
Teddy, somebody wants a car.
Yeah, I know, right?
Teddy, can you have Fredi answer the phone and sell him a car?
No, it's the late night. I don't know why it's a Vancouver number, anyways. I'm not going to pick it up. No, but I mean, if you talked about a couple of the guys that you talked to earlier. Marty O'Neill held the room pretty well too. It was a guy that you were kind of respected because he was very meticulous in his X's and O's about what he saw from a goalie's point of view. So I mean, I've always had the benefit of being involved in a bunch of teams that have some really important guys that can hold locker rooms and are well respected. So
Syracuse shuts down. What was next for you after Syracuse?
After Syracuse, I went to Philly. And went to play for the Wings. You get a guy like Jake Berge. You get a fellow like that. I get a guy like Kevin Finneran. So those are some guys that they play on the field and they hold their own, and you kind of want to emulate what they're doing. And again, I always say that it's one thing to be talking in a dressing room, but it's another thing to be doing it on the floor. And those guys are always bringing it on the floor too.
Cali BBQ is proud to be an official sponsor of your San Diego Seals. Buy our slow smoked barbecue at any Seals home game or online anytime at www.calibbq.media.
So, Teddy, you walk in, you're a draft pick, you got picked 11th. You go to the tryout process. It's different than what it was like at home because it was shorter, right? Tell me about your first training camp experience.
It was a lot harder than I actually thought it was going to be because I always thought I was kind of in shape. I was never a gym guy. I was never a weight guy. I just always got by with what I could do. And my first year, I don't think I could put up 145 more than like 3 or 4 times. So I was like I was embarrassed. And you watch guys like Andy Turner just throw it up as his warm up weight and he's just tossing around and I can't do it 4 times. So I really felt underprepared for that camp. I knew I could, and then I did the beep test and I'd never done a beep test before. And I never wanted to do one after that because it was the dumbest drill I'd ever seen. But it was at that point in time, it was the real gauge for how teams felt that you were in shape. And I found out that I wasn't in shape at all.
Do you think the frosted tips had any impact on your training camp experience?
You know what? I honestly,
when you walked in the locker room and the guys looked at you.
No, I didn't have it then.
Come on.
I had a shaved head early on. I just started to let my hair grow, and I was bored, so then I started dyeing my hair. But honestly, like when I look back at it now, those first couple years in Rochester, I didn't take it seriously. I just, again, I thought I could just get by with my natural talent. You know, I lived with Andy Turner. I lived with Rodney Tapp, guys who went to the gym all the time, and I would just go and shoot hoops. I wouldn't work out. I wouldn't run on the treadmill. I'd just go and shoot hoops and have my exercise that way. And it really cost me because even though I was behind some incredible lefties, like I said, Junior, Willie, Dewey, and Derek Milosky were the 4 lefties I had to be behind my first 2 years in Rochester. I wasn't getting in. The only way I got in was because Derek got suspended. And so I played a couple of games while he was suspended. And then I got in a couple others. But even my next year, when we lost Dewey, I wasn't prepared because I just thought, you know, I kind of felt entitled. I kind of felt like, oh, I'm an 11th overall pick. This should be my spot. I don't need to do any of that stuff. And it cost me because I got passed over by a lot of guys who worked a lot harder than I did.
Isn't it amazing how Fredi and I played on Team Canada in '98, dyed our hair, right, changed colors, and we lost our hair. I think because of that, we lost our hair.
I think, that's a good point. Let's blame that.
I dyed my hair more than my brother did. And I have a luscious head of hair that is regrown.
I have a funny story. Chris Gill was on the TFL podcast a couple episodes ago, and we didn't talk about this, but '98, all the Canadian guys dyed their hair, and he tried like 6 times to get blonde hair out of his. It turned orange.
Orange.
And because he had like deep black hair, right? And it could have been the funniest thing. He tried and tried and tried, and ultimately it just stayed black, and now it's gray, but whatever. You know, look, it was a lot of funny. Teddy, what was your pathway after Rochester? Like how did that go? Because I know you ended up in some pretty –
Yeah.
you ended up in Anaheim.
I became the expansion boy. I was the expansion boy for the National Lacrosse League. I went from I was golfing one day, and I got a call from Jim Brady out of the blue. And I only knew Jim Brady from WLA/OLA Man Cup meetings. And he had gotten control of the Anaheim Storm, who were moving from New Jersey. And he said, we just traded from you from Rochester. And I was like, oh, shit. All right. Cool, Anaheim. This is awesome. Let's do this.
Did you guys ever play against each other?
Never. Nope. There was one opportunity when I was in Rochester, and Rochester went to Washington. I believe that was the game that Paul scored a backhander from the top on the power play in overtime to win it.
That happened so many times.
That's just
which game was that?
Which time it was. That was like probably 2002 that happened.
He did that so many times.
That we would have had a chance.
Same as Washington Power is the same as my podcast. Nobody was there, so
nobody was there to see it, so it didn't happen.
Yeah. So so I go to Anaheim, and I was there for 1 year. We went 1-15. There was nobody in Arrowhead Pond. It was ridiculous. It was a gong show from day one. We had missed flights. They were supposed to fly us down. I was supposed to live down there with Cam Bergman and Steve Evans and Chris Panos. They never got us a house, and they were supposed to. And we were brutal.
Did you ever meet Jason Williams, or was he in jail?
No, that was in New Jersey when he shot his limo driver allegedly.
Allegedly.
No, not allegedly. He actually went to jail.
I just want
not
to
alleged. If you go to jail for it, it happened.
But it was such a gong show that in Anaheim, our gloves still said New Jersey Storm on. We didn't get new gear. Like they just kind of did as minimal as possible. And then Marty O'Neill picked me up in Minnesota, and we had a great year in Minnesota. I think the league should go back there. That was an incredible fan base that loved us from day one. And then the next year, Marty traded me to Edmonton, and I was reunited with Paul Day, and we went 1-15. So I had some pretty fun years.
What do you think your collective record was after Rochester?
1-15, 1-15, so that's 2-30. Then we went, I think, 4-11 in Edmonton our second year. And Minnesota, we were like 6-12 or something, or 6-11 in Minnesota. We were pretty good. We made the playoffs in Minnesota that first year.
That's because every team in the league made the playoffs.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true. But we had there were some real lean times in Anaheim. Minnesota was wicked. We had a great. That was probably the most fun I had, was that group in Anaheim with like Ryan Cousins and Scott Campbell and Darcy Berthume and Ryder Bateman and Kelly Hall were my Victoria buddies, and we were all traveling together. So that was kind of like Fred's Syracuse Smash, was when we were all, because Marty was the key cog in it all again, brought all those Victoria guys there, and we had a time. But I thought Edmonton was a really cool spot to be, because I'm a huge Oilers fan, like my brother and most of our family. So to be able to play Northlands Coliseum and see all the names, etched inside the bench rails was a pretty cool experience.
I'll tell you what, I agree with you. I'd love to see Minnesota back in our league, and
Yeah.
I would love to see Edmonton back in our league. I think those are two markets that really would have an opportunity to excel under the right opportunities with ownership and support, and I think there's fan bases both in those cities. So I would welcome the opportunity to go back there. So Fredi, you played in Philly, and I know you ultimately find your way to a team in Washington, and along the way, you and I crossed paths again, and you started to play for the teams that I was associated with, and obviously I loved having you around. You were a huge crowd pleaser, but I do remember one moment that for me defines Fredi Jenner not as a player, but as a character in the game. And there was a lot of those moments, because I was a huge fan of you and huge heart. And I love Fredi Jenner. I was a big fan of Fredi Jenner when he played the game. Big fan of him now too. But
Oh yeah, thanks.
my favorite moment was a playoff game in Toronto, and scores a goal in the ACC in the new building, and we'd moved on from Maple Leaf Gardens, but the Toronto Rock were still a huge draw, 18,000 people in the Air Canada Centre. You scored one of the early goals of that game and then shushed the crowd. And
I'm not sure if that was a good moment to do that or not, because
it turned bad after that.
Yeah, it turned bad afterwards. That's for sure.
It was one of the moments I will never forget, that visual and watching that film. And what was going through your mind with 18,000 people and you were going to shush the crowd?
Man, it's probably the biggest problem of me is that, I don't care how big somebody is, I'll try and run through you, right? I don't care how big a crowd is, I'm going to try and shush you. And I think that's kind of the heart that I have of the whole sport, is that I just want to do whatever I can for my team. And if it means trying to shush that Toronto crowd, because if there's one team that I can't stand, it was the Toronto Rock. And, I needed to get our team pumped up. I needed to get our guys going. And I think, you kind of do things that you don't even really realize what you're doing. And then you see it on video and film after, and you go, man, what was I doing? But that was it, man. Like, that was, you just take that moment and you just want to grab it and just hold on to it forever. And and my brother, he made was it for my birthday or was it, I can't remember what it was for, but I've now have that little, what are they, GIFs, whatever the kids call them these days, GIF. I have that little moment video that I can text out. I can
would like you to send that to me, because
I'll send it
belongs. It's that was etched in my history of this game, is that moment with the Washington Power glove on, STX glove.
Yep.
Finger to later in that game, which is I think that the moment that Teddy was probably worried I was going to tell the story of, is I think you hit the crossbar in overtime that would have sent us to the finals.
Yeah, I think that was the one where I did hit the crossbar, or at least. I think I faked low and shot low. Or there was a moment that I had a chance, and it was just whoops, nope, that didn't work.
It's another moment etched in my brain, that the Washington Power, the lowly Washington Power that was trying to grind their way through, and we'll talk about that team in a second. But
we were on before you move on, because I was in Rochester at the time, and we were on a bus traveling from Rochester to Albany to play Albany in the semifinals. And we had the game streamed on someone's phone or something like that. So we got to listen to the overtime when Blaine Manning scored that goal and sent the Rock on. But I remember being on the bus listening to that game as it happened.
I'll tell you what, it was that game. 2 years in a row for the Washington Power losing to the Toronto Rock. I think it was both overtimes, and it was both in the Air Canada Centre. Heartbreaking for us because we thought we had pretty good teams that were, kind of manufactured out of thin air for the most part because the teams in their place in Pittsburgh weren't great. They came from the Baltimore Thunder and ultimately put together what I thought was a really good team. But that moment where everybody covers Paul Gate on a 6-on-5 scenario, everybody covers Paul Gate. The net's empty in the other end, and the ball goes to Fredi, and it's like, oh my God, we're gonna win! Hey, we're gonna win!
No,
don't put that pressure on me. The crossbar went out of bounds. The game ended. Actually went to overtime. Yeah, sorry, there's no question in there. That was just me reliving a really terrible scenario. But anyway, talk about that.
Don't trust me. I still have lots of Toronto Rock nightmares too. So it's okay.
A quick break. This episode is sponsored by Manscaped.com. Manscaped is the only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene. If you've been listening to our channel for a while, you know that we are big fans of Manscaped and their Perfect Package Essentials Kit, which is the world's finest all-in-one manscaping kit that makes manscaping safe and easy. And just when you think they've got it all figured out, they take it to the next level. I'm excited to be one of the first to confirm that after 18 plus months of research and development, the new Lawnmower 3.0 waterproof body trimmer has just been released and comes with a ton of new upgrades. Get 20% off plus free shipping from your Perfect Package 3.0 purchase when you use promo code SEALS20 at manscaped.com. That's code SEALS20 for 20% off at manscaped.com. Now, back to the pod.
I think because I came in second game in after that because I didn't get into the Buffalo game, which was the first game. So I came in. That was the year that I was playing I tried out for the Ravens, and then got cut right at the end. And then
that was brutal, by the way.
You gratefully gave me the opportunity to get all the way to the East Coast and play. So. It's one of those things where you what you said there was exactly right. You had guys like myself and a few other guys flying in from the West. You had a few guys flying in from Toronto and Ontario. You had a couple of guys that lived in the Baltimore area. You had some other guys in the Washington area that lived there. So it was definitely an eclectic grouping of players from all aspects and all different areas and different backgrounds. And to be able to bring them together and the way that Kilgore was able to kind of get us all to see the common goal and kind of forget about where we were all kind of coming from. I think that, as you sort of said, was kind of the onset to where a lot of the teams are kind of looking at now and how they do have fly-ins from different areas, primarily because that's kind of the way that the league has gone now. But I believe that it set the tone for, of being able to kind of put all the differences aside of whether you're Canadian or American or whether you were an offensive guy or defensive guy or whether you're an Ontario guy or BC guy, you kind of forget about that and you put the red jersey on. You're like, hey man, we're power. And it was of the worst names in the history of the National Lacrosse League.
I remember we played when I was in Rochester. We played in Philly, and my dad came and saw our game. It was the first time I ever played, and it was in Philadelphia. And then the next morning, we drove down to Washington to watch you guys play. I think you guys might have played Calgary, and I could walk around the entire arena and see maybe 4 people.
It was the quality marketing and sales.
And it was like Continental Airlines Arena.
The juggernaut of sales and marketing people that I put together.
It's the Saddle Dome of the USA.
Yeah.
It was. Well, we played in the MCI Center the first year.
That's what it was.
Okay, yeah, right.
And the MCI Center is now, I think, the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C., where the Caps and the Wizards play. And if you remember correctly, our first weekend, I think it's the only time it's ever been done in the National Lacrosse League. Our first weekend that we played as the Washington Power was on the 30th and the 31st of December at home at noon on both days.
Oh my God.
That was the start of my career in Washington. Those were the dates that we had, and the hockey team played later that day. So you paid $50,000 in rent if you played the same day as a hockey game, and you paid $75,000 in rent if you played a standalone game. And so we had these two dates where hockey was playing a back-to-back or whatever thing they were doing, and it was New Year's Eve later that night. We played Toronto on the first day. We actually had like 6,000 or 7,000 people. And then the next day, we had like 14. And on New Year's Eve at noon in Washington, D.C., and it was literally Saturday and Sunday. We played Saturday and Sunday on the 30th and 31st. And I got to tell you, it didn't go, let's say, uphill from an attendance perspective from there.
And not too many teams have had back-to-back home games since.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Never happens.
I think we've seen it once there was like a Friday, Sunday, and I can't remember who it was.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody's ever done that, and I certainly don't think anybody's ever done it from an afternoon start. So
that's the only arena that I've ever played in, and that includes like WLA games where there's not very many fans. That's the only arena that I've been on the floor and I've heard a conversation in the stands from fans. You can actually hear them talking, so that there's nobody in there.
Yeah. What's really a bummer about that is that team was fun. That team was good. It was exciting. It was a fun team to be around. Teddy, tell me about your transition from playing into broadcasting.
I tell the story because it's kind of funny. When Shaden Santos and Colin Doyle had Rude Boys Lacrosse, the website back in the late 90s or the early 2000s, I was a communications major at Mercier, so I always knew I wanted to go into sports broadcasting and journalism and all that stuff. So I asked them if I could do some writing for them. And so I was still in the WLA, and I was writing a column under a pseudonym so nobody would know it was me.
Was that Teddy Knight?
No, it was Jar Jar Dinks.
Wait a second. You've got another alias that I didn't know about?
Yeah. So I wrote under the alias of Jar Jar Dinks, and I wrote WLA like weekly recaps and game reviews and stuff like that. And then, like I said, when I was in Rochester, I wasn't playing a lot, and so I needed something to do. So during the week, I worked at the arena building in-game videos and stuff like that, and then on road games, I'd hang out with Ripper in the broadcast booth, taking stats or just watching the game. And we happened to be going to Ottawa, and I was a scratch. And he said, "Hey, man, you want to do color with me?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that was the first game I ever called, and it was unbelievable. And I was hooked ever since. And once I stopped playing after my second year in Edmonton, I was calling WLA games for the Shamrocks. And I was calling Minto games in Vancouver. And I just got my feet wet, and I enamored myself with calling every level of lacrosse that I could. And I owe pretty much where I am now is to a tweet that you sent to me after a Shamrock game and a phone call we had the next morning and got me to Colorado to call Mammoth games. And it's been an incredible journey ever since, and I absolutely love it. And I wouldn't be doing anything else in the world if I was offered it.
Well, I know your contract's up soon, and you're looking to move to Southern California, and none of those guys at the Mammoth watch my show anyway, so this isn't tampering.
Oh, fair enough.
So
I think my contract's over. I'm a year-to-year contract, so I believe I'm a free agent.
Teddy,
I believe.
Freddie, Teddy, whatever.
My
Freddie,
story. Molly does it too.
Tell me your best Del Halliday story.
I have to narrow it down to one.
Is it the one where he lost the nut?
Oh, God.
Tell me your best Del Halliday story, because Del Halliday, who is also a TFL, right?
He is a
But
TFL.
not many
He is
people
absolutely
know.
a TFL.
not many people know Teddy Jenner, the Del Halliday, everybody knows Teddy. Not many people know Del Halliday, the TFL from the National Lacrosse League.
Well, if I want to tell a story, I mean, probably the biggest story probably would come from the fact of it outside of lacrosse. And it would be the fact that of all of the group of guys that we kind of played with and hung around with, like Del really never knew what he wanted to do. Like he just wanted to play lacrosse. He just wanted to do all the things, right? And we never really knew what Del did either. He did summer jobs here and there and just kind of whatever. And then the next thing you know, like fast forward to now, and the guy basically runs and owns a massive vineyard up in the interior BC.
It's not even a vineyard; it's an orchard.
Well, a vineyard orchard. I mean, it's both. But I mean, you talk about a guy that probably, how would a guy know how to, smush berries with his toes? And the next thing you know, he's creating these amazing wines. But that's not really a funny story, because there's probably way too many other funny stories that I forgot.
But we should make sure that we talk. It's Elephant Island wines.
Elephant Island wines, absolutely.
It started out with a lot of fruit, right? Dessert wines and stuff like that from the Naramata Bench up in British Columbia. Yep. So those of you that
did we just get to show a sponsor?
Get to support Del Halliday and Elephant Island Wines, and he was an amazing player at every level of the game, but I know you guys were pretty close. And a little shout out to our buddy Del, who's up in Okanagan.
I think the losing a nut story is the funnier story of the two stories, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, you take a shot in the balls. You take a shot in the balls, you're going to lose one of them.
It sounds a little like Nick Casello, who did the same thing for
the
San Diego Seals here. He did the same thing in a practice, and he gets hit, and I walk over to him, and I'm like, get up. Like, get up. He finished practice because he didn't want to look like he was soft, which I think Del did some of the same thing. And we all kind of were like, yeah, just get up and play. And so, they go to the hospital, and sure enough, their one testicle is the size of a grapefruit. And
there's a lot of good stories. There's a lot of good Del Halliday stories, that's for sure.
And Del Halliday is now a Uniball.
Uniball. He is.
Uniball. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, who would you put in the MILL Hall of Fame that's not there? And Teddy, I know you've.
So is this MIL and NLL? Are we like joining them all together?
Yeah, you throw them all together. So the early days that is not in there today, and obviously knowing that John Grant and Sean Williams and all those guys are going to go in, but somebody that nobody would expect, who would you put in there?
Okay, I got three. I got three guys that I think should go in that aren't in. MILL days, I want Ricky Soul in.
Okay.
NLL days, I want Casey Powell in.
Ricky Soul, just so everybody kind of remembers, right? And I know you had him on your podcast recently. It was a very good one. Mm-hmm. And certainly with current events, probably should revisit. People should go listen to that again right now, because I think it's appropriate. But Ricky Soul is one of the first black players in the National Lacrosse League, in the major indoor lacrosse league, and certainly put his mark on the game. And there was a number of others that should be recognized, but Ricky Soul, probably one of the very first guys in our game of color, and that created a level of diversity.
Yeah. So Ricky Soul's one. Casey Powell's two, the only American to be named MVP of our league. And number three is Reggie Thorpe. Probably.
You took my name, man.
I know. The probably one of the best American defenders to ever play.
My comment was, if you're going to have Patty Cole, you have Reggie Thorpe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly complemented each other on either 100%. Side of the border, but Toronto plays Rochester, as many times as they played.
Oh, back in the day, like 4 times a year.
Heated battles and rivalry that they had, right? It was, Pat Coyle obviously was the brand name for the defense on one end, and Reggie Thorpe was the brand name for the other defense on the other side. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I got to play against him a number of times, and certainly, he had a short career as a head coach in New York, but I'm sure he'll surface again, and he will be part of our league again, and look forward to seeing that. But who's your favorite NLL head coach?
Only probably because I had him twice was Paul Day. He understood how to communicate with players, but he also made practices fun. He made being a part of the team fun. And then he would turn the switch and make sure that everybody was ready to go on game days. And he really taught me a lot about being a professional athlete and being a professional lacrosse player. And he was just fun to be around. And now that I'm in the position that I am and where he is with Peterborough and in Philadelphia, I can talk with him more, and he just continues to impress me with every step that he takes in his journey.
I probably didn't have enough consistency in my coaching that to kind of pick one over the other, but I respected Darius Kilgore very much because the way that he coached was the way that he played, and it was a no bullshit kind of coaching style, but the passion that he brought when he was coaching, you knew that was coming from a place that isn't just about X's and O's. It's about bleeding for the other guy and doing what you got to do for the other guy. And I personally hold that as a huge. X's and O's are one thing and tactical is another thing, but getting somebody to go through a brick wall for another guy, that takes a lot. And there was a lot of character within Darius that I appreciated and looked up to. In my massive coaching big picture, I know that I never got to be a part of him in the pro league, but Chris Hall probably was the coach that I probably have the utmost amount of respect for in the grand scheme of lacrosse in general.
So I have a great Chris Hall story that I literally just told earlier today to one of my colleagues here in the office, and I'm not going to go into massive detail, but you guys all know Ward Sanderson, who was part of the Colorado Mammoth organization for a while, Vancouver Burrard's legend. He definitely is a TFL. But at the end of the day, we're beating Calgary in the 2006 last regular season game, and it was like a blowout. It was 17-7, and things got out of hand late in the game, and it got ugly, and there was a number of kind of shenanigans going on, and Ward Sanderson comes out of the press box, walks goes all the way down in Calgary, goes into the locker room. And back in the day in Calgary, the locker room was weird because everybody walked through that back alley, and so it was like nobody really worried about it, but it's since changed. But ultimately, Ward gets on the elevator, goes down there, goes through the tunnel, walks out into the bench. He's not allowed on the bench, but he walks down on the bench, walks past Gary Gate, walks past Russ Hurd, and he stands at the glass. And all he just stands there holding onto a stick, and he's staring at Chris Hall. And he's not watching the game. He's looking like the game's happening over there. He's looking out straight at Chris Hall's side of his head. And he was just basically ear fucking him with his eyes because he was so freaking pissed off that Chris Hall was sending guys out after our guys that he just stood there and was trying to intimidate him. It was quite funny. I'll never forget that. Ward Sanderson.
That's Ward Sanderson for sure. You're right. I mean, he could stare melt you just with his eyes, man.
Yeah, he was
break your hand.
So talk about Fredi. Talk about the Colorado Mammoth for a second, because you went there in the transition from the Washington Power from Baltimore to Denver. It was our first launch of the franchise. You were there right from the very beginning. Tell me about your first experience, that first game against the Toronto Rock.
Well, I mean, you talk about polar opposites of not players, but you talk about polar opposites of crowd and atmosphere and what you're getting for entertainment value. Like I said, you go from being able to have people in the stands having conversations to rolling out with Harley Davidsons in the opening game and fireworks and just the amount of electricity in just the stands was miles apart. And I think that portion of getting, Philly was probably my first real experience when I played in Philadelphia of what it was like to play in front of 15, 16,000 fans. I still get chills thinking about that, but there was a different atmosphere. Philly had all the history behind it. Colorado was just pure raw. Like nobody kind of knew what to expect because this was like all new, and it was still such an amazing feeling that I still don't know how to kind of put it into words, because it wasn't as traditional, and it didn't have as much tradition as Philly did, but the raw emotion and the raw excitement of what was happening, you just knew it was the perfect setting for lacrosse in that town.
Teddy, you obviously watched that because your brother's playing there, and now you're in the booth there now, and it's a little different scenario now, but talk about what your experience was as you watched your brother play in that environment as a lacrosse guy.
Yeah, well, I got to play there too, right? When we were in Anaheim, we played in Colorado. I was there. I was on the floor for the first ever sock trick, and I'll never forget that moment. And
I will say this: we played Anaheim. The only time that we played Anaheim in Colorado was the only time that I actually started drinking in the first quarter in the press box in my little booth, because we knew we were going to kick the piss out of it.
You did kick the piss out of us. But, that was a moment that I'll never forget, just because, like Fred said, it was raw emotion. They'd never – and I've talked to people who, were working at it, like, okay, 3 goals. I think you might have told me this story. 3 goals, what happens? Throw hats? We don't throw hats in lacrosse. So what do? I'm like, 6 goals? What happens if a guy gets 6 goals? Socks? Sure. And then we just started throwing their socks. And I'm sure you had a bit of a piece of it, and Willie B had a bit of a piece of that, trying to figure out what the hell to do. But that was just, I always say this, lacrosse will always work if you make things your own. And Colorado has made their atmosphere their own. And now that I get to be at the top of it and hear all that noise reverberate from turf level all the way up to the top of Mount Loud, and I sometimes can't hear Jamie or myself talking when Colorado goes on a run. And
you know what? I want to make sure that we give full credit to the person that came up with the sock trick, and her name is Karen Woods.
Nice.
And Karen Woods, it was her idea, and she walked up to me and she goes, "Hey, we should do this thing when, you score 6 goals." And I go, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard."
And it's now a league-wide thing.
You should never do that. And
but it's awesome.
That just solidifies your great idea momentum there, doesn't it?
Well, I said my great idea was, okay, with 6 goals, the women should wiggle out of their bras and pull it out their arms like they do and throw them and have a bra trick. But nobody was buying into that. Nobody.
Really? That's surprising.
That's why the hot tub's not around anymore, Steve.
I thought it was a great idea.
And everybody wants the hot tub to come back, by the way.
I got rid of the hot tub because
I know, because the nip slip.
The hot tub, the best hot tub story was Dan Dawson.
The All-Star game.
Yes.
In the 04 All-Star, not 04, it was 09 All-Star game.
Unbelievable.
Dan Dawson scores a goal, runs out the bomb, and he's gone and comes back, jumps in the hot tub with all his gear on.
Yeah.
And he asked me if it was okay if he did it, and I said, sure, you can do it. And he goes in there, he's got his shoes on, all this other stuff, and he goes, well, I can't play anymore. He literally sat in the hot tub for the entire 4th quarter.
I know, I remember that. Oh, God.
So, the Colorado experience is something phenomenal, and being able to be the voice of the Mammoth now, and, it's a bit of a egotistical dream come true to be able to watch all these goal clips and hear my voice, and to watch all these games and go back and to see how passionate Mammoth fans are. It's incredible. It's just one of the best parts about the National Lacrosse League is the fans.
It's a pretty special experience in Colorado, and if you ever listen to this and you haven't been to a game, you got to go to a Denver game, and anywhere you are in the National Lacrosse League in one of the cities, Denver's got to be on your bucket list to go see a game because it's
100%.
a fun place. 100%. And I would welcome anybody that wants to come to San Diego as part of that bucket list, because you got to come see San Diego as well.
I spent a whirlwind 24 hours there. And I had a blast. We stayed right at that marina. What is it? Marina on the Bay or something like that, right down there by the arena. It was gorgeous, and the weather was phenomenal. Your arena needs a touch bit of work. There's not a bathroom for the broadcast.
You got my producer laughing. This is the first time he's laughed out loud.
It's funny because I was in Vegas before we went to the San Diego game, and it was like going to be 2 weeks later, and I saw a couple of your staff members say, yeah, I'll see you in San Diego in a couple weeks. Like, have you been to our arena yet? I'm like, no. They're like, I've heard great things. They're like, okay, people are lying to you.
We are going to fix that. I promise you. We're working on it.
Put a bathroom by the broadcast booth. Doug Locker can't last 4 quarters.
That's true.
I know.
Another quick break. Coronado Brewing Company is proud to be the official craft beer partner of the Seals. Enjoy fan favorite Orange Avenue Wit and their new Salty Crew Blonde Ale all season long, and visit coronadobrewing.com to find their award-winning beers near you. Stay coastal. Cheers.
So I want to do something I do with everybody, and I throw a few names out there, and I just want a quick reaction. And so I'll start with a name I know both of you guys know. You played with, watched him, Brian Langtree.
Crazy eyes.
Crazy legs.
Yeah, that's true. He's a wild man. That guy just was 100% ball full of energy, and he still is.
The guy just flies around like he's just million miles. Like this is going to come across funny, but it's the old slogan, right? Fast jet, no pilot.
That's the best line ever. That's the best line ever. Kevin Alexander.
The great. He was terrible looking in spandex. Loves his sarsaparilla, and one of the funniest guys I know.
Probably the epitome of do as I do.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not gonna sacrifice, then get off the team. And he was all that. He was all of that and more.
Dallas Elliott.
Unbeatable. I don't know how many shots. My first ever NLL goal was on him. I don't think I beat him after that.
The most unorthodox goalie I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, hands down.
Patrick Merrill.
Chicken legs.
I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill him a million times.
You don't know who Patrick Merrill is. We were at Mercier's together. We called him Chicken Legs just because that's just how he ran. But intelligent, professional, and going to be an absolute great long-time coach in our league. You have an absolute gem, Steven.
He's just the type. I mean, the reason why I wanted to kill him was just because the way that he played was just hard-nosed, and the way that he went through things was just amazing.
Paul Telmo.
The dude.
That's the one where I said who.
Yeah, that was the guy Fred didn't know. I was with Talmo in Anaheim, and all I remember is he looked like an old man, but like you knew he was the fittest guy in the room. And when you walked around with him and the Sombrado brothers, you knew nothing bad was going to happen to you because you were walking with made men.
The Sombrado brothers, just for everybody's edification, the Sombrado brothers brought to the National Lacrosse League the opportunity for the PLPA when it was created in 93, 94, in around there. They were vying for the opportunity to have it be a Teamsters local. So the players' union would have been a Teamsters local.
Can you imagine?
I'm not sure the league would be around today. But yeah, Caleb Toth.
Clutch.
Yeah. One of the hardest shots ever.
Yeah.
And probably in junior had the biggest butt end on his stick I've ever seen. He probably put 7 rolls of tape on the end of his stick, and it was bigger than the bottom of his glove. It was huge. But that guy was a Jerome McGinley of lacrosse.
Wow.
He always played with a smile too. I don't know. I never held that happen either.
Yeah, he was just a happy kid.
Hugh Donovan.
I still, when I think of Hugh Donovan, I still think of the face-off.
That story was told the other day. But go ahead.
I can't remember who was it. Who was it? We were playing. Who we were playing? Buffalo.
I think it was Drew Candy.
I can't remember who it was, but opening face-off. Him and
I think it was Drew Candy.
Yeah, maybe.
Just dropped and went.
Yep. Because the refs didn't know what to do. Because they'd never seen these two guys at the front face-off. They're like, why are these two guys here at the face-off? Right?
They're giants.
Well, yeah. If I'm not mistaken, the one ref went to go and line up the face-off. He saw these two guys there. He stopped and pulled back and went back to the other ref and said, am I supposed to drop the ball here or what? And went back and dropped the ball. And these guys didn't touch the ball. They just stood up and went.
Actually, I think it was brothers. There were two brothers. This is gonna bother me now that we don't remember this on the air.
I wasn't there.
Other guy in the story, but we'll figure it out. Marty O'Neill.
I said it before, but man, that if you talk about a guy as a tactician, an X and O's type of guy, he was so finite in everything that he does. You know, obviously from the way he played goal to the way that he ran some of his business stuff like that. He was just very, very precise and finicky.
He lived across the street from my good buddy and his brother, who also NLL brothers are the Hebner brothers, Tyler and Nolan Hebner. They lived across the street from Marty O'Neill.
We gotta mark them. We gotta put them in the list.
Oh yeah, they're right behind us. They're right below us.
Oh, they're both below you.
They're right behind us. Yeah. But Marty had Tapper and Doddridge and all those guys stay at his house. They had all the Shamrocks were always over there. And so guys like Tyler and Nolan and myself were always in their backyard just playing pickup lacrosse. And Marty was always a giver of his time, and he still is now making equipment and helping with the goalies of the future. And he's a little dry, but the guy can speak his mind, and he has a really good pulse of what he does. Like his articles, whenever he writes his articles for Inside Lacrosse, they're always some of the best articles that they put out, and he really is in tune with what the game's going through.
So I close the show every episode. I ask this question, and I think it's appropriate because there's so many stories in our league and in our game that I think should be told, and one day we might tell them. But there's great documentaries that we could tell throughout the sports world, but in lacrosse there's few. But I love to compile the stories of the TFLs that join the show. And I love to hear, Fredi, what 30 for 30 story would you tell?
I don't know. I was thinking about that when you posed it the other day, and I was like, man, I don't know how I could come up with a 30 for 30 on some of the stuff that I went through, or some of the stuff that I know about. But I think one of the biggest things for me was how, and it's probably still a little bit, how many of our guys, as there are guys, all the guys that played, left work on a Thursday or a Friday morning, flew 2, 3, 4, 6 hours, however many hours to get to a location, practiced, busted their butt for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, playing lacrosse, bleeding, doing everything you possibly could, and then partying their asses off, and then hopping back on a plane to be able to go back to work Monday morning. There's something to say about the truth of what we did to just play the game, and how guys before us played the game for $49 paychecks and basically played for the love of the game.
It was $83.
$83. Like there's a story there, and I just don't know how to put it.
Oh, you put it well, man. There's no question that's a story, and a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that will tell the same story, and we'll talk about the love for the game and how the game of box lacrosse became ingrained in them. And you go back into so many people that we all know and the names of our past. And, Teddy, you talked about Ricky Sewell and a number of those guys that started out early on in this process. And they did it because they loved it, and they kept doing it. And this game has survived. This league has survived because a lot of players love playing the game.
You get myself, that's a car salesman. You get teachers. You get business people, whatever it is, firefighters, cops showing up on Monday morning with stitches and black eyes and crutches, and you're like, wait a minute, you left work on Friday and you had nothing. What are you doing? Right? And you're showing up, but you're showing right back up to work on Monday morning, no matter how tired or bagged you were, beat up you were there back to work because you were teaching kids and selling cars and putting out fires and all these other things. And that's just because you love that game so much. You were prepared to do what you had to do to go play.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Fredi.
Mine's a 2-part episode. And it all really revolves around one player, and that's Chris Sanderson. We're going to start at the 98 World Games with the greatest lacrosse game nobody saw and ever played. What is it, 12-1 in the fourth quarter, and you guys come back, tie it up, force overtime. JT should have passed to Tommy Marichuk on the crease to win it. I know, but probably should have done it anyway. And then part 2 is Chris Sanderson playing in the 2010 in England. And just the story around that and everything that he went through to get there and everything that he put himself through to get there against everything that the doctor said he shouldn't be doing. Chris Sanderson is the epitome of what a lacrosse warrior is. And I think his story truly needs to be told. And I think it works perfectly with a 30 for 30 on that game in Baltimore because there are so many people that were a part of that game as players and thousands more that were in the stands that night. And I was a kid in Victoria watching with all my buddies at a bar. We took over the bar. They had NASCAR on. We had one TV. By the end of the game, every TV was on the game. Nobody knew, but we all experienced that moment. And we all remember that. And I will still not watch overtime of that game because I just want it to end in a tie.
Well, he just gave me chills because I watched that game from the sidelines. It certainly wasn't as much fun when I got pulled out after the first quarter and never saw the field again. But
Gilly was better than you.
No question. No question. But John Grant and I both get pulled at the same time and watch the game together. And ultimately, we don't come back. And, JT hit the post. And
Rodney Tapp was absolutely phenomenal in that fourth. You talk about what guys like Trevor Baptiste can do and Greg Gorenlian can do, like all these stud face-off guys that are out there now. Tapper was just on a different level that game.
Tapper was on a different level, but that game took a turn when they took Peter Jacobs out and they put the kid from North Carolina in, I can't remember his name, Ryan Wade.
Yeah.
And Ryan Wade ended up going in and taking faceoffs, and he hadn't taken faceoffs the whole tournament. And he starts winning in the overtime. There was 3 or 4 faceoffs near the end of the game, right? And man, craziness. But
Fuller could have won it with a loose ball off that faceoff right at the end.
Ball,
like I said, that game, there's still not like a really good copy of that game. I'm sure there's people who have it, but there's not a good audio quality copy of that game online anywhere. But that's a game that people need to watch and sit back and just marvel at that game because
the guy that has the game is Lee Belsmo, and it exists. And you can see it if you Google it on YouTube.
Oh, it's on there. It's just a crappy copy.
It's not a broadcast quality game, but it certainly was a special experience for us, Freddie. We were there, and that whole.
At least we both can say we were on the bench with John Grant Jr.
That is true. Anyway, look, fellas, appreciate it. Love having this brother group on. You're the 100%. Second brother group, but
still the number one, though. Still the number one in your heart, right?
Number one in my heart.
Absolutely.
Excited that you guys took some time. Appreciate it. And, man, fellas, keep doing what you're doing. Freddie, I know you're teaching a ton of girls the game, and you're doing so many good things in British Columbia and Victoria and coaching lacrosse. And Teddy, you're setting a gold standard as far as I'm concerned for play-by-play and telling great stories in our league and grinding away as a media guy. You guys are both huge contributors to our game of lacrosse, and I greatly appreciate it. And thank you for doing that.
No problem. And I think you said it. I mean, Ted knows this stuff of all lacrosse that's happening right now, but you asked me about, 16, 17-year-old female field lacrosse players in BC and Canada and boys that are 14 years old. That's where my bread and butter is, man. And I think that, we all believe it, that's where the game really is truly fun, is at the youth levels. And that's where we can make our biggest impact. And that's where I'm having a lot of fun coaching girls, coaching boys, and bringing that passion back to them. So I appreciate you and all that you've done for me in my game and my career and my time playing for you. And I'll give you the opportunity here on TFL, because I am a TFL.
Can we get shirts that say that I am a TFL?
Yeah.
Well, the only problem is you gotta have my picture on your T-shirt. So my son, who has,
I can wear it on. If you make it shorts, I can wear your face on my ass. Then we're talking.
my son has a T-shirt that just has his picture, like his head, on his T-shirt, and he's smiling. And I'm like, you have a T-shirt. He comes home from college with his own T-shirt, his own face on his own T-shirt. I said, how do you do that? And he wears it. Like, he legitimately wears his own face on a T-shirt.
He's a Govett.
Like, come on, man.
He's a Govett.
He's a Govett.
He's a TFL in his own right, let me tell you.
Yeah, he's a good kid.
He is a TFL. He's a college TFL. But let me tell you, I'll make merch next time I make a run of merch. You got to watch my cooking show.
Oh, I see it.
I have
a whole line of merch coming for the cooking
You're
show.
the face of the Seals franchise, man. Like, you are the guy. When it comes
That's
to the
bad.
Seals,
That's a
people
bad
say
thing.
he's Govett. I know. Like, you got to let other people start cooking.
Hey, fellas, love you. Appreciate you being on. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Stevie. Thanks, Gov.